I brought up the subject before, but uh, do we remember how we would define prajna? Prajna is, boiled down to its details, prajna is the ability to see what's in front of you, to see clearly what you're facing, to see reality unfettered. And this, of course, is something that only someone who is awake can really do. So it's a signal of enlightenment or awakening, or however you want to place it. But when someone is working on prajna, they're working on trying to take their assumptions, their fears, and their concerns about a particular situation and move that aside and see what the situation is or wants. Not subject to your own desires for what the situation should be. So naturally, of course, it's not something that we achieve very often. But strangely enough, I like the surprises that can be in a prajna lesson. Do any of you know, Mom, I think you do, any of you know what a bread lame is? L-A-M-E. Do you know a bread lame? Well, they're popular with sourdough chefs, and they're little wooden rounds that are two halves with a carving on each side, and in the middle is a razor blade, and you've got a screw right in the middle. And the way you use it is when your bread is first either in the second rise or when it's just coming out of the oven, you can open that up and slash your bread. Those nice, like, look like open wound type of things like that. Those are bread lames that do that. And bread lames can be anything that fulfills that purpose. They're kind of little rasps or blades. But apparently there's a whole world of them out there, and they've got different carvings that have meant different things over time. It's just this little thing, and yet I had one in my utensil drawer for probably 10 years and had no earthly idea what it was or why it was there. It was only because I looked at it and thought, well, let me go put this with the scrap wood. I guess this is some scrap I had. No, looked it up on Google and found out what it did. And there's an interesting thing, because it was a different object when it was just a nice decoration. And now that I know it's got a knife in it, one, it's kind of a dangerous knife. It doesn't have a handle. You're holding on to the round, which means if it catches really firm, that blade's just going to turn right over into your fingers. I mean, it's physics, but there it is. My guess is there are some folks out there who do a lot of baking who view themselves as an artist with such things. So that would be fun. But the prajna of it is different. The prajna of it when it was a decoration is different than it is when you know it's a tool. And when we talk about right view, and right view is a part of the Eightfold Path that most people begin with when they teach it. And famously, the Eightfold Path is a sequence, but it's meant not to be taken in sequence necessarily. In other words, wherever you are, you can access the others. I compare that to AA, where if you've gone through AA and worked the steps, you're always working step one. Step one is always present for you. And sometimes you'll do things just to work on step one, which is to remind yourself that your life was intolerable with this and all the different ways that can manifest itself. But if prajna winds up being right view, to see things as they are, how do we teach ourselves this skill? How do we teach ourselves to know we're seeing what we're seeing? And we have some scientific method. We can write things like that down, but that's talking formal research. I'm just thinking on the go. How do you try to improve what it is you're seeing in terms of it being what it is you think it is? How would you imagine this has been done? Well, one of the cool things, are we all familiar with Zen koans? And those are the famous riddles in Japanese Zen Buddhism. And koans didn't have to be lyric. It could be a whack upside the head with a certain question, answering a certain question, and so forth. And yes, there's an awful lot of beginning Buddhist teachers who really make hay out of that. But after you've been for a while, you start to realize when it is not called for. But all those different surprise questions and the slap you on the hand when you're trying to eat, or any of these other almost like bullying things that teachers have done to their Zen students. And yes, it's been out of control from time to time, but the truth is they're trying to shock your perspective out of the standard perspective that you normally carry. So those of us who don't even have to really believe in the historical Buddha, but if you think Buddha was a dude and you're into what he's doing, you're into the lessons, you've taken as sacred to yourself some Buddhist writings, and then your teacher says, if you meet Buddha on the side of the road, kill him. Now, that's a very famous one. What did that mean when you first heard it, Will? I imagine you've heard that.
Yes.
That one. What was your reaction to that?
Well, it's not what you think it is.
True. Why do you suppose that advice is worth giving?
To remind you to investigate, instead of taking it as it is, as what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
You see it what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wise will.
Mm-hmm. It's like not taking God's calling card and expecting it to do all the work. Sometimes you have to look a little past that. And a lot of people like that because it does ask for further investigation, but it also says, hey, this isn't someone that you should personally lionize like this, that they're above others. Now, it's true, you don't walk around killing other people either, but the notion is, it's about, no one's saying to kill him and make it an act of martyrdom on his part. I don't think that's what it's about. It's about saying, kill that concept that there is a guy out there who did this and can show you the way. At the same time, this is in conflict directly with the Eightfold Path, which is follow these suggestions, these rules, and it will get you closer. Each of the steps of the Eightfold Path has hundreds, if not thousands, of comments on them over the years. The Chinese academic tradition, until quite recently, was a scholar added their name to the text. Like Sun Tzu would make a paragraph, then underneath, somebody who taught it 200 years later writes a little bit of an expansion that someone felt was worth keeping. So they kept it. So this idea of there being a textual author that can be found and revealed is very Western. It's not at all what you think of in the other things, which is why when in the late 90s, when some Chinese novelists became famous for talking about old China in new China, fantastic series of books came out by 4 or 5 different authors, and the Chinese didn't know how to handle famous authors. It's like, are they the Beatles? No, we're not doing anything like that. I mean, how do we celebrate them? How do we? And the Chinese tradition doesn't really have a tradition of worshiping authors. In fact, if you're calling attention to yourself as the author, you're suspect. Because none of us have authored these things. We only borrow them. That's a very Chinese way of going about things. We've borrowed this wisdom. Maybe we've advanced it. That's the term with adding. I like your smile. Or you have a particular thought?
The term advancement, because you're really not advancing it, you're just fitting it to your needs.
Absolutely right.
At that time.
And you're right, advancement actually implies an ideal ending, because if it's improving towards something, it'll get there. It's funny how I used it. I'm used to advancing being a term in the restoration car business. If I buy a car that's too expensive for the work it needs done, I can't advance it. I can't fix one thing and hand it to somebody else with the new wheels on it. So I couldn't get a chunk of profit out of it. I couldn't advance the car if I don't manage my stuff correctly. And interesting, because there is the implication in that where you'll eventually be restored. It's not necessarily so in Buddhism. So I chose the wrong word for the right reason. That's neat. I love that. Well, I think a lot of what people have talked about with the Eightfold Path and right view is just add to your certainty of what you're seeing an equal certainty that you could be wrong. Even if it's just sitting right in front of you, I could be wrong about this. In argument, sometimes it's to be able to ask your opponent, are you seeing what you think you're seeing here? And how do you know? That's a much nicer way to go about it than says you. I mean, says you has a certain Long Island flair to it, but beyond that, just to say, am I sure I'm seeing this? What do I need to see that I may be seeing? And why can't I see it for what it is? And the truth is, you may not have a whole lot of super advanced thoughts towards any of these topics. Could have just been a nice little 30-second exercise in your day. But if you get into the habit before reacting of saying, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? You'll suck at it at first, because anytime we introduce something into the playbook, you have to practice it a few times. Low stakes practice is best with friends and family, but you get out and then suddenly you've got a new way of looking at things publicly. And the public being in arguments with others or in teaching. And to remember that we're not seeing what we think we're seeing. And it doesn't have to do with our abilities. I could have held that wooden toy a long time, the knife, and still probably not figured it out with the alacrity that you can when you have AI on your side taking a picture and looking at it. But just knowing I'm not seeing something that's clearly here. I actually had faith in the Michael that put that in the junk drawer, in the utility room. I mean, most things that go in the junk drawer, they don't come out unless it's to be thrown out a lot of the times. So I knew that it was worth looking into. I just didn't have the time or inclination then. Now I know about bread lames, and I think there's such a great name. There's got to be a character somewhere named Bread Lane. That would be awesome. But just with the awareness that we aren't seeing the whole field of vision. There are things that our own perspectives will keep us from seeing.
And never will.
And never will, to some degree. To some degree.
Well, quantum physics is kind of supporting that too.
Mm-hmm.
The cup you had that you hold up there is not the same cup that it 5 minutes ago as it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's with atomic regeneration and things like that. Even like you tell someone with cancer, congratulations, in 4 years you will have rebuilt your entire body, and the cancer's only there if you tell it to be there. How to drop somebody's responsibility for their own illness right on their front door. That's not what we do very often, but I see what you mean. You can always that. Now, are you always going to be a prisoner of your perspective? Well, you're right. The quantum mechanics say yes. Your perspective is as much as the part of the reality of the observer as it is of you. So it's not a one-way
Takes
street.
the observation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a fantastic thing. You know, it's interesting when you see scientists making these distinctions. It's like, great. You like to think one of them got a little Buddhist in them, but at the same time, because I mean, the Chinese are known for many, many wonderful inventions, but modern day engineers is not necessarily one of them.
And then the concept of no self within right view also changes our perspective when we remember that.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by no self? It's a trick
Well,
question.
I've heard, someone said, you think you're real. We don't think we're real, but you think you're really real.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
You're the one who's real, right?
Just the continuity of sensations, memory.
Mm-hmm.
There's no individual separate self.
And you get to some far edges of that thinking, like with the philosopher Berkeley, who basically says if it's not in God's mind, it's not anywhere. So if something's out of sight, you better hope it's in God's mind.
So does that mean it's not in your mind?
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. Oh, we could go down that quite often. What I like about no self, and I don't necessarily practice with the no self phrase, I just assume that what I think is the self is fooling me into something. And usually I can find one or two insecure reasons to support that. Okay, why do you need this to be true? Well, because this, and because you're this, and yeah, you were a little stubborn on this, as you tend to be. And what I love about that approach, am I seeing myself correctly, is that there are some people, I even know therapists, who really don't want you to get into this habit because you're criticizing yourself. And your body listens to the terms that you use to describe yourself. It really does. The linguistic value of the words that are popping in your head matters. At the same time, it's like, well, what if instead of it not being real, it's just not what I think it is? And I don't know what real is.
There's always more to it.
Yeah, and what I try to do, and especially with other organized religions, when occasionally in Texas you get confronted by somebody who wants to know why you're a Buddhist and how to fix you. So you could come back into God and Jesus' good graces, etc. And I don't mean that to be a facetious description, but they encounter and say, well, so you're saying that's just as irrational to say that there's nothing here. I said, oh, I have no idea. I don't know how a toaster works. I'm not the one that you go for cosmology, but I don't know why it matters to me. Don't know why it's so important to me. Am I only going to matter if I have an insight on life that tells me I matter? I matter in how I treat people. It's kind of where it comes to. And that's for me. And a lot of people like me, someone who could be said of, you feel like you have to earn your oxygen. Like being here on this planet is okay if you're helping people. And if you're not, well, you'll give yourself 2 or 3 hours to relax and then you have to get back to work. Because you can't just sit and relax all day. This is my own thing I have to fight. But right view helps me in that, well, what's the ideal person you're trying to be? Is it attainable? And why are you spending so much time on it? Well, it's because for me, if I'm helping someone, that tells me I'm following my path. And that gives me encouragement. even if I'm not sure that what I'm seeing is real. At the end of the day, I've done this before, I think I've done this in here, but when people talk about how theoretical gravity is, because there are all these instances where gravity doesn't behave the way it should in cosmology, at the same time, every time. So there are some things where we can drop our golden retriever right through. And that doesn't mean we've changed anything. But it can be, you can devolve into real facetious thinking. But just wanted to give us the notion that we're not seeing what we think we're seeing, even on this beautiful day. And we don't have to be alarmed by that, just aware of it. The people who react with alarm tend to be people who have a very vested interest, usually from feelings of fear and a want of safety, that they need everything to go right. The alcoholic in your midst is a chaos driver in a family, no matter what they feel about themselves. So one of the things that chaos drivers do is they demand nobody else be chaotic, because they're counting on you guys having your act together so they could be chaotic and fit in the cracks. If more than one person decides to be chaotic at the same time, it all falls apart. All right, let's have us a medicine.